called fight or flight. The body does not know whether the stress is a mental one, because I'm nervous about being the starting point guard doing this and making sure our team wins, or that now I'm involved and the intensity goes so high because the team is very fast and very strong. Now all of a sudden my level picks up. My intensity of the stress of the exercise can cause hormones, and these are stress hormones. So you probably heard of adrenaline, right? You've probably heard of cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Glucagon, does that sound familiar? I hope you guys all have glucagon. That's a synthetic version that you have, but the body produces glucagon too. So these are stress hormones that are released when the body signals it, and it goes to the liver, and it now spits out glucose out of the liver based on this hormonal activity. So now when you, whether it's the mental one or the physical one, you have to deal with the 300 blood sugar, and you're going to start your activity in 15 minutes. That's a tough position to be in. One, that your performance will suffer when you're that high.
Okay.
What, you know, for extreme highs and extreme lows, performance will certainly drop. That's why we want to try to be someplace in the middle. Be prepared for this, and then when you get into this position where you have this 300 blood sugar, you need to act on it. So what do you think you might want to do with the 300 blood sugar, and you're going to exercise soon afterwards?
I'm going to do a correction, but not as much.
Good, very good. If you're going to do a correction, which a lot of people do, and I do 100% of the time, but maybe not as much. And when you say not as much, if you normally would give 1 unit to bring down into a decent range, how many would you give at this point?
Well, I'm a big chicken when it comes to that, so I do half.
Yep, that's exactly what the recommendations are. Cut it in half and see how it works. All right? It's better to err with less insulin than more. It's better to have a 300 blood sugar than a 25 and paramedics are involved. It's a good strategy, which is use it, and so whether you're on a pump or shots, if you're going to eat closer to the activity, so the ideal time, whether you have diabetes or not, to eat is probably about 2 to 3 hours prior to the activity. If you're going to have, you know, a sit-down meal, whether it's lunch or whatever, it's probably 2 to 3 hours. As you get closer to the activity, it's recommended to have smaller portions, and that's when you start thinking about cutting the insulin. And typically, a strategy that's used by many, and you'll see it in the books, is 50%. So if you normally would give 4 units for this sandwich that you're going to eat, but you're going to exercise within 45 minutes, give 2. We can talk about that.
Yeah,
Rick, you said for each 60 minutes of exercise, 30 grams of carbs, and then you also said eat a meal. Your meal that you want to eat is 2 to 3 hours before exercise. So the carbs that you're talking about per minute of exercise, is that during, immediately, you know?
Well, I'm not saying
so
during,
it's, what you're saying,
it's to prep for it.
You're not going to prep 30 grams. If I'm going to exercise 60 minutes, I'm not going to eat my 30 grams of carbs 3 hours prior, right?
No, that's
yeah,
good
exactly. I just wanted to clarify that.
It helped me out tremendously, but the timing of insulin, I think, is just crucial around exercise. The take-home in here is watch that when the peaking of the insulin, if it's around the exercise time, you're more likely to go low when it peaks. So if you know just a basic sort of concept about when insulin starts working, when it's peaking, and when it's out of your system. Right? And then we'll kind of roll into insulin on board. If you're using the temporary basal feature, or reduce the amount of insulin to offset because of the exercise, you need to do a little bit prior to the activity. And just sort of think about this peaking. So you may want to try a temporary basal 1 to 2 hours prior to the exercise rather than right before. A lot of the kids go low afterwards. So part of the reason why they go low is that, let's forget about what happens during the activity. They have decent numbers during, but now they go low 4 hours later, 5 hours later, in the middle of the night. I think Emma told me that sometimes 2 in the morning, but they get, hammered with a low blood sugar. Why do you think that might be?
Is it like the adrenaline?
Adrenaline?
Kind of
So,
worn off?
Well, worn off, that's a good thing, because when people go sky high during or right afterwards, and then when things sort of calm down, those hormones aren't in there signaling the liver to release glucose, it kind of wears off, and now you may drop. And the studies show anaerobic activities or high blood sugars, still you have a good chance of going low later on, all right? And part of the reason that is that think about the food that you eat. It's a combination of carbs, proteins, and fats, right? Your body uses, what food did we say mostly for exercise? Carbs, so that's used there. So the body turns to two places to get glucose in the body after this food is basically used up. Where does it turn?
Glycogen reserves.
Yep, you got it, glycogen reserve, so you
Right,
took it a step
and the
further.
liver.
So the two places, one is the liver, the other is are the
cells.
muscles. Mostly the muscles that we're talking about, like 75% of the glycogen. Glycogen is a stored form of glucose, all right? That is released and is now used for energy, right? So now you have the food used up, you have the glycogen stores used up. The body then turns to another place to get glucose, and it doesn't happen right away, it happens over time. And this is part of the reason why you might be going low hours later. Where does the body turn to get glucose? Once the food's gone, the glycogen's used up?
Fats and triglycerides.
Well, yes, over time,
Right.
but there's some other place. The blood. Blood glucose. There is glucose in your blood. And that's this whole thing about balance. So where people miss the boat on this is that when you're done with exercise, you need to replace glycogen stores, right? Doesn't matter whether you have diabetes or not, it's a good practice because the next time that you exercise, usually the next day, is where you can suffer with either low blood sugars or poor performance because you didn't replace glycogen stores the day before. So